Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. Erin Summers here along with John DeShazier. The Saints taking a 26-8 loss to the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday. It was better in some areas. However, looking at the final score may not feel that way, JD. But I think that we saw some improvement on the defensive side.
I think you saw a little bit of improvement on both sides. Offense didn't turn it over. Had an explosive play or two down the field. And defensively, it started really strong. Got after the quarterback, kept them off the scoreboard, forced a couple of field goals. But eventually, if you're on the field, as much as the Saints defense has been on the field lately, you're going to have some of those issues, and especially if you don't tackle as well as you want to. The tackling had been tightened up a little bit against Denver on Thursday night, and then some of those issues jumped back up again. And the explosive plays, you give up a 38-yard run by the quarterback. We know mobile quarterbacks have given this team issues for the last several seasons. You give up a 60-yard touchdown pass, and then you give up other passes of 45, 27, and 24 yards. So explosive plays, the things that this team wants to eliminate, haven't eliminated them, haven't been able to eliminate them to a satisfactory status. And then, again, the offense is just out of sync. The offense was just toothless against the Chargers. Look, the Chargers are a really good defense. They came in leading the league in points allowed. So we knew scoring was going to be difficult going in, and yet weren't able to put up a touchdown, held to 8 points. Had to change the quarterback, looking for a little bit of a spark from Spencer Rattler to Jake Haener. Still can't get on the scoreboard, and still can't get in the end zone. And it's just one of those things where the things that have plagued this team throughout the 6-game losing streak, through the first 5 of those games, jumped up again and plagued them in the 6th game. And there's got to be a fix, a reckoning. I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but there's you can do all the self-reflecting you want to, but all that self-reflection has to manifest itself into performance. And it hadn't done it. And I mean, they've been self-reflecting now for a month and a half, and it has not manifested itself into a win. And this team desperately needs a win. It hadn't lost 6 straight since the 2005 season. That's a long time. That's almost 20 years since they've lost 6 in a row in the season. So, hopefully they can put it back together. Obviously, you're playing the worst team in the league in Carolina this coming Sunday. But this team needs to find something to feel good about after a game, not because they practice well during the week. That none of that stuff means anything if it doesn't result in a win on Sunday.
Yeah, because this week we had a lot of players return from injury, and there was that talk all week that there's the spark on the team. There's this renewed energy life throughout practice this week, but it just didn't seem to translate to the game. There were good moments, I think, by Pete Werner and Taysom Hill coming back in, but I think where I was disappointed was the offensive line. You had Cesar Ruiz back and Lucas Patrick, and the offensive line really struggled. And a lot of it, there was a lot of penalties there as well. Yeah,
that's the pre-snap penalties have to cease, and even forget the pre-snap penalties. The penalties that are wiping out decent plays, the holding penalties, they've got to get a handle on that. And that's one of the things where, when you're talking about attention to detail, and that's what Alvin Kamara spoke at length about post-game. When you're talking about attention to detail, those are the things you're talking about being able to eliminate, to coach them out of your system, to rid them and to minimize them to the point where, when you have a decent play, when you have an 8-yard run, 9-yard run, it doesn't go back the other way because there was a holding penalty, or you can't get off the play properly because you get a false start and those kinds of things. Those things are just death nails for an offense that's already struggling. You can't be behind the sticks. First and 10 is a lot different than 1st and 20. And 2nd and 6 is a lot different than 2nd and 16. and this team continually has those issues. And then, you'll have, the chunk play penalty on defense, or a critical penalty where it might be, if it's 3rd and 12 and you get a defensive hold, it's only 5 yards, but it's an automatic first down.
Yeah.
So you can't get off the field. Those are the things that are plaguing this team and have plagued them through these 6 games, and they're things that you would hope would not still be plaguing this team, because you're on the team you play, what's happening, and I get it. You do have injuries, and you're getting guys back, and it's tough to mix and match and expect chemistry, and yet, it's got to happen.
Yeah.
It's got to happen, because you don't have any other choice. You don't have time to say, well, we need 3 weeks of reps with these guys, and then we can get in sync. You don't have that luxury. This isn't preseason. You got to get out there and you got to make it happen, and they hadn't done it. And I mean, it's I'm sure I can't imagine what it's like for the players. Because we're frustrated. We ain't throwing nothing. We ain't catching nothing. We ain't punting nothing. But for the players, you consider every one of those guys probably was the best player on his Pee Wee team. He was the best player on his his junior high team.
Yeah.
He was the best player on his high school team. He was the best or top 3 players on his college team probably. And those teams were successful. And now you're talking about you get to the NFL and you lost 6 in a row.
Yeah.
And you don't really know how to apply the brakes, because it's like, okay, what's happening? Well, the same thing that happened the last game happened this game. Okay, so you go to practice, you coach them up, you say, okay, we shouldn't do this. The players say, okay, mentally we shouldn't do this. And you get in the game and you revert and you do those things again. So where's the disconnect coming from? Because that's what they're going to have to figure out. And the NFL, man, we just mentioned already, Carolina's the worst team in the league. Don't think for a second Carolina isn't looking at the schedule saying we can get one from that team.
Yeah. Right now, absolutely.
Because that team, meaning the Saints, has lost 6 in a row.
Yeah.
Carolina's won more recently than the Saints have. So don't think for a second that Carolina isn't saying, you know what, we can get us one right there. So you are everybody's prey, P-R-E-Y, and not, a predator right now. So, it's one of those things where the disconnect has to be connected, and they're continuing to talk about communication issues and those kinds of things. And it's like, hey, we've been talking about this for a month. And at a certain point, and I understand fans' frustration, you don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear it. You just want to see the results on the scoreboard.
Right. At some point, you've got to go out there and do it and stop talking about it. And I think that's where there might be a disconnect between maybe some of the habits that they're forming. And like you said, kind of muscle memory, going back to making those mistakes, the penalties, the drops, the whatever it is, starts, I think, in practice, the way you practice and then the way you play.
Well, that's, there are whispers and hints. Well, not even whispers and hints. Alvin Kamara basically said they're going to have a players-only meeting.
Yeah.
So the accountability, it begins with the players, because there's only so much coaches can do. And coaches don't teach you to hold. They don't teach you to jump off sides. They don't teach you to have pre-snap penalties. They don't teach you to have pass interference. That's not being coached. So, there's got to be some player accountability. But there's got to be some accountability, I guess, from the coach's standpoint of, if these things are happening, what's the penalty for it in-house? Because
what are we reinforcing?
Yeah, you gotta make a guy understand, hey, you're costing your teammates, you're costing this team, and so there's going to have to be something that goes along with that will make you not continue to do that. Mm-hmm. And so where does that come in? But when you have a players-only meeting, you can hopefully look guys in the face and not point fingers necessarily at them, but point at yourself. Okay, what am I doing that could be better, that could help this team win?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's, your sleep habits, that might be your dining habits, that might be, you can't go out, that might be a host of things. I don't know. It might be yoga. I don't know. Whatever it is, you need to extend yourself and avail yourself to those new things or open ideas that you can do to make this team better. DeMario Davis talks about process all the time. Process. Well, I get it, but the process isn't working. So something is askew in the process, and the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and get the same result. So something's got to change.
Yeah.
Now I don't know what in the process or what, well, not necessarily DeMario's process, but what in this team's process has to change, but something's got to give.
Well, I know for me personally, if I don't get enough sleep the night before, or if I have a couple drinks, I'm not on top of things as much the next day. So, I mean, yeah, you got to kind of assess your entire lifestyle and how.
I've never seen that from her, folks. I've never seen that. I've never seen that. Yeah.
I try not to drink anything if I'm about to be on camera because words don't make as much sense. But you got to come in the best version of yourself to be able to perform, pay attention, focus the way that you need to. So maybe that's going to be some of that conversation that these players are having. But I think a lot of it is they need to stay together at this point too. And bringing everybody together and having a conversation might help that.
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, the players generally, you can say you're playing for this, that, or the third, but most of the time you're playing for the guys that you practice with, the guys that you sweat with, the guys that you see in the equipment room, or the guys that you see in the recovery room.
Right.
Those are the guys you're playing for because you see the sacrifices that each individual makes. When you're walking around, you say, well, I'm playing for Alvin Kamara. Well, Alvin's out there with a hand that's got broken bones. He's got fractured ribs. He had a hip injury and he hadn't missed a game. So that's the guy that you're playing for. You're playing for DeMario Davis, a guy who missed a game with a hamstring injury and hadn't missed another game in his NFL career outside of the one game he missed for COVID. That's the guy you're playing for. Mm-hmm. You're playing for, Taysom Hill, a guy who, fractures his ribs. And, I know he gets injured, but because he's putting his body on the line for your team. Those are the guys. So I don't think that's going to be an issue playing for each other.
Yeah.
Again, it's got to be. I mean, I don't know where the disconnect, where the dip comes in the execution part, because you can. It doesn't matter if you have two really good plays on defense if the third play is a chunk play that you give up.
Yeah.
So you can get them in a 3rd and 8 and be favorable and all that kind of stuff. But if you give up 25 yards on 3rd down, then it didn't do a whole lot of good. And we've seen a lot of that out of this defense where, you're just like, okay, this could be the one. This looks like the defense of old. And then it's like, oh, they're still on the field because they gave it up on 3rd and 9. Mm-hmm. And so where does that cleanup come? Especially when you're talking about guys hobbling around. Marshawn Lattimore leaves the game yesterday with a hamstring issue at the end of the game.
Yep.
And so those kinds of things you've got to be able to overcome, hopefully. But, you get into the situation that you want to be in and you're not able to close the deal. And the same thing with the offense. You get into a 3rd and 3 and you're not able to convert that. That's going to be debilitating at some point in time. The Saints were 2 for 16 on 3rd down yesterday.
Yes.
2 for 16. That is, it's hard to win a game being 2 for 16 on 3rd down because you're not staying on the field. You can't get any continuity.
Right.
You can't get anything going because Matt Hayball is punting 9 times. He can't be the star of the game with 9 punts, 5 downed inside the 20. Wonderful job by the rookie, but he can't be the star of the game.
No. I mean, I don't know how his leg's not falling off today. 437 yards.
He can't be the star of the game. And we've seen games, first 2 games, where the guy basically had a courtesy punt in the 4th quarter because the Saints were kind of, at the end of a mercy kill by then. And so he had a couple of courtesy punts. But he can't be the star of the game for the team in that situation. So you got to be able to get some continuity going on offense. And the only way to get some continuity going on offense is to keep possession of the football. Now, I'll give, again, the Chargers have the best defense in the league. The only number that matters to me when you're talking about the best defense is points allowed. And they allow the fewest in the league. So they're doing something right.
Yes.
And they make you take the long, hard road. They don't give up a lot of chunk plays. They make you throw it underneath. And you factor in that you got a rookie quarterback back there. So I know it was Spencer Rattler's 3rd start, but he's still a rookie. So, you're able to do some things to hopefully, if you're the Chargers, confuse them a little bit, rush them a little bit, those kinds of things. But you got to be able to establish some continuity, especially when you get into the situations where, like I said, it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2. You got to be able to convert in those situations, keep the chains moving, keep the clock running, keep possession of the football, keep their defense on the field so hopefully you can wear them down.
Yeah.
Because if you can't do that, if you're 2 for 16 on 3rd down, I guarantee you look at the box score at the end of the game, you look at that scoreboard, and you're probably going to be on the short end of it because you didn't convert enough.
Yeah, and the Saints were able to pick up some yards, 366 total yards. Alvin Kamara had 122. Chris Olave had 107. But it was just the stalling of those drives and the inability to keep them. They only went to the red zone once.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you had a lot of opportunities. You had the ball a lot, but you couldn't stay on the field.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's for the offense, that's critical. And again, I don't care if that's Spencer Rattler. I don't care if it's Jake Haener. I don't care if it's Derek Carr. You have to be able to string drives together when you can't get the big home run play. You can't get the explosive. So sometimes you need to be able to construct a 10, 12-yard drive. That's the way it is. Not all of them will be three or four plays and 60, 70 yards. Some of them have to be those 12-play, 75-yard drives that take some time off the clock because you strung it together, you converted some third downs, you stayed on the field, and they have not had that sustainability.
Yeah. The quarterback situation is what it is. Derek Carr is your starter for a reason.
Yes, he is.
And I think we're seeing how much he actually can do for this team and does for this team. And people love to hate on the quarterback when things aren't going well because he's the main one out there. But man, it'd be nice to have him back.
Look, let me tell you something. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says there's a reason the next man is up is the next man up. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says up because we say it all the time. There is a reason that the next man up is the next man because he's probably not as good as the man. And Derek Carr has taken a beating, social media and, those kinds of things and those kinds of things where it's like, folks, you don't understand. I hate to talk down to people, but I don't know that everybody understands how difficult it is to play quarterback in the NFL and to play it to a level of a Drew Brees or a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. Everybody feels like, well, Drew Brees did it, so he ought to be able to do it. Well, Drew Brees is Drew Brees.
Yes, he is one of one.
Yeah. So I mean, and look, there were times when the Saints went 7-9 3 straight seasons that Saints fans wanted Drew Brees out of here. You try to tell them, look, guys, you don't necessarily, I don't think you grasp what you have. You will one day, but I don't think you grasp it right now. So now you're looking at Derek Carr and people saying, Spencer Rattler, they drafted him and he ought to be QB1 and not. No, there's a reason Derek Carr is on the field. He's maybe he's not, the guy that you love. No, maybe he's not, Patrick Mahomes, who is.
Yeah, right. Another one of
one. Yeah, by the way, who is. But he has shown himself to be an effective player for the Saints, and whether this season or last season, because in totality of last season, you can look at the numbers and say, well, empty calories, whatever you can call it, whatever you want to. You can only play who you play when you play them, and he put up some impressive numbers last year, and began this season with some impressive numbers. And now I think people are understanding you need some experience at quarterback. It does make a difference because Spencer Rattler has not, been able to be as effective, obviously, as the Saints want him to be. But a lot of that has to do with the youth of playing the position. He's trying to figure it out on the go, whereas a lot of these things Derek Carr has already seen, and maybe you can't blitz him the way you blitz Spencer Rattler because he'll pick it up a little bit quicker and maybe get the ball out a little bit quicker, and maybe he understands his options a little bit faster than Spencer Rattler does.
And I think that Carr can make up for some of the injuries that are out there because of that as well, because of his decision-making, his ability to adjust. He's seen probably everything that there can be in football. And I will say there are differences between rookies as well, because what Jaden Daniels is doing, he was a top pick for a reason. Spencer Rattler was in the 5th round. So there is a difference. And I know people are like, well, there's a rookie out there doing it. It's like, it's not the same.
Yeah, the world is not created equal, and not all football talents are created equal, and not all systems are benefiting the quarterbacks the same. I mean, they have catered that thing to Jaden Daniels' strengths, and Jaden Daniels also has a pair of really good legs that he can, bail out of trouble if trouble arrives in the pocket. He can get away. Better than most quarterbacks, outside of maybe Lamar Jackson and 2-3 others maybe, but he can create something out of nothing, and that's a hard thing to do. NFL, college, that's a hard thing to do, and when you got a guy who can do that, that's a special talent to have. He's got it. So I understand, folks. You say, well, hey, Spencer Rattler should have been drafted higher. Well, look, he was drafted in the 5th round, so the suspect you would suspect then that he would be a bit of a project,
Yeah.
brought along slowly. And that's what the Saints said. We're going to bring him along slowly. He just got thrust into it because Derek Carr got injured. But there's a reason they said they wanted to develop him because, there's a reason, as you mentioned, that, guys get drafted where they get drafted.
Yeah.
There's a reason, 31 teams opted not to choose him at all, and 32 teams, including the Saints, passed until the 5th round. Mm-hmm. So there are reasons for these things. People evaluate, and they spend a lot of money evaluating. So, yeah, every now and then you're able to get a Tom Brady in a late round like that. I mean, every now and then you can fool around, and, a blind squirrel can find a nut, and you can just get a dude, and he turns out to be a whole lot more.
Wasn't AK a 4th round pick?
Yeah, AK, he's a I think a 3rd round pick, but Marcus Colson was a 7th round pick.
Yeah.
So every now and then you can, it can hit, but you can't make a living, making it, hitting home runs in the 7th round. It just doesn't happen that way in the NFL. It just doesn't. So, Spencer Rattler, give him time. This was a great opportunity for him and a great learning experience for him, these 3 games. But get Derek Carr back in there and hopefully make a push beginning with this Carolina game.
Yeah, so Spencer Rattler goes 12 of 24, 156 yards, gets sacked 3 times. Jake Haener comes in. Saints were down 16-5 at that point. Head coach Dennis Allen said he was just looking for a spark for anything. Yeah. Haener comes in 9 of 17, 122 yards. He was sacked twice. So it's a tough situation when the offensive line isn't holding up. You're not getting the protection. They're not able to establish a run game. Yeah. A lot of it does fall back on the quarterback, and it's, I think, tough for either of those players to have had much success.
Yeah, and you're behind, so the opponent knows you got to throw. Right. It's getting late in the game, so they know you got to throw it. Yeah, you might run a couple of have a couple of run plays here and there, but you're not going to be able to cover the ground. You're not going to be able to cover enough ground quickly enough because you need to score fast, and it's hard to do that with the run game unless you pop one for 75 yards, which is pretty rare in the NFL.
Yeah.
So you got to have to do it. You got to have to do it by air, and they know you got to throw it, and so they can just kind of say, okay, we're going to play a little coverage on the back end. We got some really good guys up front that can rush the passer, so let's go get after him, fellas. And so they wind up with 5 sacks, and you can have that happen. Now the Saints did the same thing early in the game. They got after Justin Herbert. I mean, they really got after him. And then after maybe the first quarter, it seemed like Justin Herbert had, forever in the pocket to throw. And then he busted out the 38-yard run, and it was like, oh, my goodness, here it goes. Because once a guy gets that kind of run, now the defense is looking at him different.
Right.
Because they're saying, okay, can we rush the way we want to rush? Because this dude might pop one out on us.
You're sitting back on your heels a little more.
Yeah, you're on your heels a little bit more, and he had more time to throw it. And so, eventually a quarterback that good, you give him that kind of time, he's going to get you. That's just, that's the law of averages in the NFL. If he's got that much time, he's going to be able to get you. And he was able to get him in the second half.
Yeah. I will give a shout out, though, to the fact that the Saints held the Chargers running backs to just 73 yards. You add in Herbert's running, and the numbers went up a little bit. I think 122 total rushing yards were allowed, but they did do a good job defending the run.
They did. They did a really good job defending the run on the running backs. But again, and the 38-yard scramble skews things, and it was not a designed run. And yet, it's one of those issues where the Saints said, okay, we got to be able to get to the quarterback. We can't allow him to escape the pocket and those kinds of things. So when you lose your rush lane and integrity, a guy's able to get loose on you that way. And, that's one of those things where you're not necessarily accounting for it, but, hey, the stats are the stats. And the stats say 122 yards, and the stats say, that counts as a rush. And so you can't say, well, that really shouldn't count. No, the numbers are the numbers. And so it's one of those things that threw everything out of whack, but they did do a good job against the running backs. And that's something that they can hang their hat on and say, okay, we stopped the run. Yeah, that was the chunk run by the quarterback, but you're not anticipating that, hopefully, much. Mm-hmm. And yet it can happen, but you feel good about what you did against the running backs, and that's something you can build on because you say, okay, we did this against the running backs. Now we just got to be able to make sure that when the quarterback is a scrambler or a mobile quarterback, we can get to him and get him on the ground.
And I don't think we'll see a mobile quarterback next week.
No, we will not see that with Carolina, whether it's Andy Dalton or Bryce Young.
Right.
They will not move that way. Now, let me knock on a piece of wood because, they'll fool around and pop one for 20 after I said that. But hopefully those guys will be where you expect them to be in the pocket.
Special teams was really good for the Saints yesterday, except for the one missed field goal by Blake Grupe. I wish he would have had that because then it would have been a one-score game. Things might have been a little bit different. But I think overall, you had the safety early in the game, Taysom Hill doing that on the block punt. And then obviously we talked about Matt Hayball's punting and what he did in that regard. Kendre Miller has a 41-yard return. So things were working pretty well in that area of the game.
Yeah, Saints have had some good special teams games. You got the earlier in the season, the Rashid Shaheed punt return for a touchdown. You got a block punt from JT Gray earlier in the season. So they've had some moments on special teams. The Blake Grupe miss obviously marred this one a little bit, but even if he hadn't missed, you still got to be able to. This team can't get in the end zone, so kicking field goals helps.
No, you don't want to rely on that.
Yeah,
for sure.
it helps, but it's like okay, I'm not even bothered by him. I should be a little bit bothered. I guess he's probably bothered by it, but you're not too bothered by it because it's like okay, you still needed to get in the end zone to be able to make it worth it. So you take that out, but Hayball had probably the best game of his short NFL career. But again, you don't want the punter to be the star of the show. Kendre Miller looked like the way you want him to look as a third-round draft pick. Now, leaves the game with a hamstring injury.
The other leg.
Yeah, I should probably whisper that because the exasperation is probably palatable through the building. I mean, this kid, God bless him. But
I feel for him. I don't know what the issue is.
Yeah, I mean, but he's continuing to get these soft tissue injuries, and it's like, dude, what are you?
Is he not drinking enough water? What are we doing?
Yeah, do you need some more electrolytes? Do you need some more bananas? What do you need that's going to you got to stretch better? I mean, what do you need to cease this issue? Because something is amiss. Something ain't right. And it's like, you shouldn't. You say a guy shouldn't have this many hamstring injuries. I, in a young career, I don't know that I've seen a guy have more hamstring issues.
Yeah.
Than Kendre Miller. And so it's like just when you feel like, okay, this is what he's supposed to look like, and you might be able to count on him, and then all of a sudden, bam, now the other hamstring, and you don't know, you know it's going to be a minute because the other ones have cost him, months at a time. So now it's like, well, you can't depend on him. The best ability is availability, and he's not available.
Yeah. And unfortunately, right now, with the way things have gone, the Saints really don't have a second back.
No, things have not worked out the way you hoped with Jamal Williams in terms of the running game and being able to, put into the pot there. And so really a lot of it has been, it's been Alvin Kamara and it's been Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
And that's probably what it's going to be from here on, at least in the near future, until Kendre Miller is able to work his way back, I guess, because it just hadn't worked well with any other tandem or any other addition to that duo. And
coming into this game, the Saints waived Jordan Mims because he was your, I guess, fourth running back then when Kendre Miller comes back. And so you don't even have that
and
to
I
help
guess it
with the
depends
depth.
on what they want to do with Kendre. If you injured reserve him, you can bring Jordan Mims back, and however you want to do it, because they are going to need another running back because you're depending on Alvin Kamara, who's still injured. You're depending on Taysom Hill, who just came back after several week absence with the ribs.
Yep.
And you're depending on Jamal Williams. So they're probably going to need another running back for practice, if nothing else.
Yeah.
You're going to have to have another one. So, you could probably, there's no reason to not bring Jordan Mims back because he's familiar with the system. But again, that's a position that's beat up, banged up, and just when you felt like, oh, here's a little bit of ray of sunshine, the clouds roll in and it starts raining.
Yeah, it was unfortunate for sure. Somebody else who got brought up actually and signed to a 53-man spot was Ugo Amadi. And I was a little surprised, honestly, that they waived Jonathan Abram and then bring him and sign Amadi up from practice squad. But he came out and got his first sack.
Yeah. came clean on the blitz. Saints designed it well, disguised it well. And Justin Herbert, I noted Justin Herbert's 6'6", and Ugo Amadi is 5'9". So
I was like, he's not quite.
Yeah, basically he had to climb the tree. He climbed him and he got him on the ground. And look, he went high, and thank goodness Herbert still had the football, and he hit him clean because it's hard to go high on the quarterback. But he went high and he got him on the ground. So kudos to him, and hopefully you can see a little bit more than that. And the Saints did their secondary blitzes yesterday. Alante Taylor comes up with a half sack along with Chase Young. So, now he's got 4 for the season, but, they're having to do those things because they're not generating the pressure you want up front.
Right.
And so you got to do something else to be able to get to the quarterback. And that's been probably one of the bigger disappointments defensively, is that they have not been able to generate the pressure up front. And you've got some really good guys up there. You got Carl Granderson, you got Chase Young, you got Brian Brzee, you got, Nathan Shepard and Colin Saunders, and you got Cam Jordan, and they have not been able to get to the quarterback the way they want to with those guys. Mm-hmm. And that's another necessity, because it takes a lot more pressure off your secondary if they don't have to cover guys as long, because you're getting after the quarterback.
Right.
Now, getting after him and getting them on the ground are two different things. And the Saints have not been able to get guys on the ground all the time either.
Yeah.
But yesterday, again, started out well against Justin Herbert. And it was obviously a game that was right in the wheelhouse early. At first, it was 2-0 Saints. Then it was 3-2. It was 3-2 Chargers. Then it's 9-2 Chargers. And you're like, you know what? The Saints hadn't played really well offensively, but they were a touchdown away from tying this thing. Mm-hmm. And they just couldn't get in gear on offense. And after a while, it was like, are they going to be able to get in the end zone? Are they going to get close enough to be able to get in the end zone? Well, is it too late? Now they're going to need 2 touchdowns to get it. After a while, it starts getting out of hand, and then you start saying, well, they haven't been able to generate a lot of offense this entire game. Where is it going to come from?
Yeah, it kind of felt like that first touchdown was going to be it for this game, and it ended up, happening that way for the Chargers. All right, so we have a week here to get ready for the Panthers. We added a wide receiver last week, and he did not play. He was inactive in Marquez Valdes-Scantling. How do you think that he's going to impact things?
I think he's going to be active because he's big, he's fast, he can run. He has played in the NFL before. So he immediately comes in with more experience than your starters opposite Chris Olave, and that being Mason Tipton or Bub Means or those guys. He comes in with more experience and more productivity. So I'm assuming it takes a little while to learn the playbook. Hopefully he'll have it down pat a little bit better this week. Mm-hmm. You put him out there, and if he's as fast as we have seen him to be, then maybe he can handle that Rashid Shaheed role for this team on offense, which you need to be able to stretch defense. It got so compacted yesterday watching the Chargers just say, okay, we're going to play our 2 safeties deep, and we're going to compress everything up front, and we're just going to see if these guys can nickel and dime down the field. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to make a living that way. At some point, you need something to stretch the defense, or you need something to make life easier on offense. You need a chunk play. You need a 30, 40-yard completion just to be able to take a deep breath and say, okay, we got an easy one, so now we can nickel and dime a little bit here, as opposed to having to nickel and dime the entire way, because the theory behind that is, if I make you nickel and dime, if I make you have to have every drive, 75, 80 yards, and you got to drive 10, 12 plays to do it, well, you're gonna false start, you're gonna hold, you're gonna throw me an interception, you're gonna fumble, you're gonna do something along the way to give me the ball back. So that's why you make teams have to nickel and dime you to death. And a chunk play takes away 3 or 4 of those plays immediately. Now you don't have to do that at all. If you can get 30 in a play, you're like, okay, that takes 6 plays that we don't have to use because we got the big one right there. So hopefully Marquez Valdes-Scantling can provide that for this offense. We know Chris Olave can, but if Chris Olave is out there and he is the lone receiver with any experience, what you gonna do? I'm gonna double him.
Yeah.
I'm not. It's gonna be like 12 ain't gonna be the one to get me. Mm-hmm. Now, if 84 can get me, if 16 can get me, if 13 can come off the practice squad and get me, if Cedric Wilson can come back from injury, if 11 can get me, fine. I can live with that. But it ain't going to be 12.
Yeah.
So now you've got 10. That's Scantling. Hopefully he can chip in and be that guy to give some relief to Chris Olave.
Yeah, he definitely needs some help and somebody opposite him out there. I think that he can help in the return game as well, especially if Kendre Miller isn't able to go. Maybe that's another option because that's what he's done in his career.
Yeah, and I know that, Jamal Williams has done some of that for this team this season. Now, Jermaine Jackson's going to have, well, I'm talking punt returns. He's going to have some better judgment. He's got to be better than he was yesterday because I think he fair caught 2 inside the 10. That is not optimal. You do not want that. But kickoff returns, Scantling can help there. You got Jamal Williams. Taysom Hill can do that also. And so, I think Cedric Wilson can provide some there. Maybe Bub Means too. I think Bub Means did some of that in training camp also. So you've got some options there. But again, you've got a guy who's done it in NFL games and been productive with it. So that gives an extra bonus. If nothing else, you know what? This guy can help us in the return game too. So that's a bonus having him on the roster.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this week they can figure some things out. Players have their meeting and they get what they need out of these practices, and we can go get a dub in Carolina, because I don't want to think about what would happen if we don't.
No, and I don't want to. I think it needs to be an emotional meeting. I don't necessarily know that it needs to be businesslike, because this team should be hurting. It should be frustrated. It should be.
Well, you want people to be pissed off.
It should be pissed off because they've lost 6 straight, and they should not be feeling well. This ain't a backslapping situation where things are going well. This is a all hands on deck, code red kind of situation where, hey, this is dire. This is desperate. We got to get something going here. Now, here's how I can be better. How can you be better? You don't necessarily need to point fingers, but depending on who it is and how you can talk to them, maybe it does need to be. I mean, you don't want to, because I don't necessarily, if you're having a players only meeting, I don't know that would fracture a team, because look, if a guy isn't playing well, he isn't doing his job, he knows. Now, it might take a teammate to say, hey man, we need you. And maybe not, hey, we need you to not hold. We need you to not, commit pass interference. We need you to catch the ball when it's thrown to you. We need you to block better. It doesn't have to be that, but it can just be simply, we need you. And they know what that means, because you know what position you play. And when we say we need you, you know what we need in terms of production. So, but it does need to be, I think, a little bit tense. I think guys need to be on edge, because it is on edge. We're midway through the season.
Yeah.
Halfway. And 2-6 ain't going to get it anywhere. And 2-6, and not just 2-6, but kind of 2-6 and progressively worse. This is a situation where you got to get this around. You got to get your arms wrapped around this quickly, because this is difficult, and this is the NFL, and everybody smells blood in the water. Like I said, Carolina is statistically, in every measure, Carolina is a bad team. Every measurable, Carolina is a bad team. But Carolina is looking at the Saints saying, we can get that one. We can get that one, because they are reeling as much or worse than we are. And there's no reason for us to not have some confidence. We're playing at home.
Yeah.
And we got a chance to we've historically been good against that team at home. So we feel like we can get this one. And the Saints got to be able to slap that taste out of their mouth, because if they're hanging around for a minute, they're like, oh, we really can get this one. Whereas the Saints you got to get that out of their thought process, and you got to get it out early.
Yeah, you got to come out of the gate ready to go, and hopefully jump on the Panthers first there. All right, JD, we'll see what happens the rest of the week. I appreciate the time as always, and hopefully things turn around here, starting with the Panthers.
Well, it's going to turn. I mean, I won't say it can't get any worse, because it can always get worse, but it's going to get better. I'm going to be an eternal optimist here. It's going to get better.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.